Thank you so much, John Kishohi, and we appreciate the wonderful job that you do at Fortinet. One thing I appreciate about Fortinet is how they are able to integrate their solution through the various sectors in this industry. So we appreciate that, and I'm confident it is a solution that can be able to upskill and also improve the services in the manufacturing sector. We appreciate you. Also want to appreciate our partners, Craft Silicon, and then also they work together with Little Cab. So we want to say thank you to that. Thank you, Craft Silicon, for your partnership, and also the other partners who are there. We appreciate the good leadership and patronage that you have given us. We totally appreciate that. We want to go into a discussion on how do we secure the 4IR enabled economy in Africa. What are the new business requirements when it comes to digitalization and also with the increasing cyber risk? What are the challenges in implementation of the same, and how we can be able to overcome it? And to moderate this session is a lady who is extremely gifted, and she has the business acumen when it comes to this particular discussion. She is the founder and the CEO of My Comply Kit. This is none other than the ever so lovely Nzelani Mweu. Thank you, Nzelani, and over to you as you moderate this session.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, Africa has seen immense innovation and resolution of African problems using technology in the 4IR, with growing utilization of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, 3D printing, Internet of Things, among others. Technology comes with its own challenges, top amongst them being cybersecurity, as businesses rely more and more on technology. In today's conversation, we will talk about how best we can handle cybersecurity as we take advantage of all the good things that the 4IR is bringing us. Our panelists are all experts who have made great strides in cybersecurity across the continent and are also running businesses across the continent that are successful in utilizing technology. I will be introducing our panelists. All right. We have two panelists joining us. There will be two more joining in the next few seconds. But let's start with you, Taz.
Hi, Nzelani, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Taz Chikwakwata. I'm a cybersecurity professional with around 12 years of experience. Specifically 8 years in cybersecurity, 12 in IT. I'm the managing consultant for Cybernesis. We are a cybersecurity and IT advisory firm which focuses on baked-in security in your digital journey. So our main focus, though, is specifically information security management systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Taz. Moses, over to you. Please do a short introduction of yourself.
Thanks. My name is Moses Maundu Mulandi. I'm an account manager with Fortinet. I have around 15 years of experience around cybersecurity, having been an engineer myself, having managed IT departments for companies in Nairobi and East Africa. And at Fortinet, we are the leading cybersecurity, one of the leading cybersecurity companies in the globe, with a very different approach into cybersecurity, where we have integrated solutions that work together to protect your digital assets. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. I think our two other panelists are having challenges joining, so we'll start without them, and when they join, we'll introduce them and then proceed from there. I'll start with you, Moses. What's in your opinion are the new business requirements associated with digitization that are increasing cybersecurity?
Thanks. I think some of the things have been mentioned with the previous panelist. I think one of the things you're seeing around the new business requirements, it's, we have noticed in a very difficult environment in Africa. So I think entrepreneurs and the manufacturing companies have to work differently. And hence now you see a crop of entrepreneurs who are now understanding, okay, this is a challenge we are in, we need to fix it. So now embracing technology to reduce some of those costs, these are some of the challenges we're seeing. As they continue embracing those technologies, then they can be in a place whereby the solutions they pick up, they expose them from a cybersecurity perspective. So some of these are some of the things I see, whereby companies are adopting new technologies to work differently, but as they do this, they're actually exposing themselves to cyber threats.
Thank you, Moses. What about you, Taz? What is your opinion? What are the businesses opportunities that are leading to more cybersecurity incidents?
Geesh, how long is a piece of string? Possibly we can sum this up into 3 words, latching on to what Moses just mentioned. And I would put it forward as increased attack surface. Now, the pandemic obviously accelerated a lot of technology and of it with the whole work from home sort of phenomena that we had experienced. But the fourth industrial revolution takes all of this now and creates a hyper connected environment for our IoT devices, so on and so forth. So in terms of increased attack vectors, and surfaces, it's absolutely incredible. But one thing that needs to be done in terms of the new business requirements is we constantly need to continue taking a risk-based approach. We need to keep our people trained, and a lot of people have had to accelerate their growth very quickly, and it's a rather unfortunate but a blessing in disguise in some cases. So people need to be trained up, and we also need to make sure that we apply the same risk management frameworks to everything that we do. That way we do stand a chance in terms of the new business requirements along with the cyber risks.
Thank you, Taz. Muyowa has managed to join us. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, Muyowa. Please introduce yourself and tell us briefly what you think are the new business opportunities that are leading to more incidents of cybersecurity.
Yeah, so that is a very good question. Thank you for asking that. So in my opinion, I think the need to digitize basically means we want to make everything digital. So a lot of CEOs would see dashboards. A lot of CEOs would like to see information displayed on screens. The need to connect devices that were not previously connected, such as legacy systems. So things like that have increased the cybersecurity risks within a lot of organizations, especially when they're thinking about 4IR. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll have to let you know that our fourth panelist, Kamal Butabati, the CEO of Craft Silicon, will not be able to join us. He's been held up somewhere else, so we're going to proceed with just the 4 of us. So my next question is actually on a report that was done by the UN Conference on Trade and Development that said that found that Africa as a whole was the least prepared region to take advantage of 4IR technologies. And I think I'll start with Moses. And what are your thoughts on what are the unique challenges that face Africa, and how can Africa turn its handicap into an advantage by avoiding the errors made in cybersecurity by other continents?
Thanks for that question. So I think the biggest challenge in Africa still stands, connectivity and accessibility is one of the biggest challenges we see. And further progress in this space will drive, broad adoption of Industry 4.0 application by business and consumers. So we probably want to see more private and public investment, and incentives are actually needed. Because one thing that I see Africa, if you look at how the revolutions of industry has gone from 1.0 to 4.0, I think one of the things Africa where we stand a good opportunity once we fix our accessibility issues and connectivity issues is we're able to leap, because I think in Africa we're probably at 2.0 now. We can easily leap from 2.0 to 4.0 with the right infrastructure, with the right policy frameworks. We can actually take a leap and actually reach where the other organizations are out there.
What about Muyo? What do you think?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Just to add on to what my colleague was saying, when you look at Africa, one of the challenges we have is cost. Cost plays a huge role in the decisions that we make. So we tend to put temporal solutions in place for permanent issues. And what we found with temporal solutions is that they tend to break. And when they break, the cost of actually fixing things becomes much more than actually implementing something from beginning to end. So cost plays a huge factor in the sense that we want to implement short-term solutions for long-term problems. And with cybersecurity, what we've seen is, because this is a very fast-paced and moving environment, it becomes a bit of a challenge to actually mitigate and protect organizations if temporal solutions are put in place. So cost becomes one of the biggest things that needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much for that. But I'm wondering then, how do we mitigate that issue of cost and temporal solutions? Taz, what are your thoughts on that? I'm sorry, Taz, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I often like to talk to myself at times. I think with regards to funding, definitely it is a big divide. And I had a good opportunity to have a look at the same report that you mentioned earlier on, the UN conference report. And I think that a lot of the challenges are summed up exactly with what Muyowa just mentioned. You have the shortage of skills, which sometimes is also pushed through by funding, the digital divide itself. $1,000 MacBook, which is like the cheapest that you can get right now, is a dream for a lot of people in Africa, So there are a lot of challenges, but what you will find is that on the software front, on the cybersecurity front, there's been a lot of advancement in terms of even cloud infrastructure, making things a lot cheaper. And I would also want to maybe touch, looking at the same report, on things to do with the existing technological gap that we've got right now. Because what you do find is that, as Muyowa mentioned earlier on, the integration of our legacy systems, which in Africa we have a boatload of those. A very good example would be our USSD usage across Africa, really, especially with the mobile financial inclusion penetration. You'll find that a lot of developed economies will make use of smartphones, data, so on and so forth. But the USSD platform works very well with feature phones, with old phones, so on and so forth. So trying to understand the cybersecurity risks of taking your legacy technology, legacy systems, and patching them into very frontier technologies, I'll put it that way, that have AI and ML integrated into them is a mammoth task. But in terms of Africa, looking at that and taking a different approach, the way I would put it across is that as Africans, we need to look introspectively. As Africans, we need to understand our own culture and try to apply the same. And to be more specific, I would say, for example, in my country, in Zimbabwe, we find that at every single corner that we have, we try to find a relationship with the person next to me. If we don't share the same last name, we'll look at totems. If we don't share the same totem, we'll look at relationships in marriage or whatever it is. And when we look at hyperconnectivity, when we look at these technological gaps, when we look at the fourth industrial revolution, we need to look at every single place where we are going to be connecting to another device. If we've got USSDs now connecting to SD-WAN or SASE or whatever it is. So we need to take the same sort of culture that we have of looking for relationships and apply it to cybersecurity and look for the relationships between everything that we are trying to hyperconnect for IoT and AI and ML. And I really do believe that can push us forward in a big way. Thank you very much.
All right. Moses, would you agree that we need to look at our culture? I know Kenya has been said to have a particularly peculiar culture when it comes to technology and how we interact with technology. Do you think that would apply here? Or what other solutions would you offer that are perhaps unique to Kenya?
Thanks for that. I think I totally agree, because I think for us to be successful, we need to embrace, as I said, our culture and understand our people, understand our unique problems, and come up with our unique solutions. So we will not be able to adopt things that have worked in Europe, US, Middle East, wherever it is, to our country. And that's why you see people like M-Pesa very successful, because it took a Kenyan problem or an African problem and found a solution, in the local context. So I think that's the only way we can also do it around, the fourth the industry 4.0.
Muyowa, you're from South Africa. Would you say that this also works in South Africa and countries around there?
Yeah, it does. Culture becomes one of the critical things that you have to when you talk about cybersecurity, because culture plays a predominantly big role when it comes to different people in different circumstances from different backgrounds and so on. But also, we never think about culture when it comes to a work environment. What is the culture of the organization in terms of how do they handle things from beginning to end? So you see one organization deciding to deploy technology. What is the culture behind how they deploy systems? What's the culture behind how they handle systems? And that becomes something very critical, because culture allows people to get into a mindset, into an environment that they can understand. So, for example, you join an organization, there has to be a culture that you are inducted into. And when you join another organization, you cannot surely. So culture tends to be a very critical thing. And I know there's definitely studies around culture, where to try and understand what are the good cultures or the guideline or standard-based cultures that can be implemented in organizations, to sort of just allow for that minimum base that can be shared, or that guideline that can be shared from one organization to the next. And so in our experience, some of the things that we've seen is that a lot of organizations do not have that culture in place. They mostly work on the basis of trying to see what they can implement in their environment. But you find that, for example, when they're deploying a particular application, there's two different approaches to the same process. So you don't see the underlying culture in how an organization would function. So culture therefore becomes one of the critical things that organizations need to perform, because this is something that, as human beings, having grown up from different cultures, this is something that we're used to, but it's something that we haven't really brought into the work environment. Thank you.
To move to a different aspect of cybersecurity, the legal aspect of it, and because I'm a lawyer, I must bring it up. Taz, I will start with you. And do you think that we have sufficient legal framework and policies, and also institutional capacity to handle cybersecurity, and to make sure that Africa takes advantage of the 4IR moving forward?
Thank you for that question. I think a lot of governments in Africa have done a lot and are continually doing a lot in terms of legislation with regards to cyber crimes. The challenge that I've seen personally is the enforcement of that, because you'll find that the law will say one thing, but for someone to actually follow up the law and make sure that this person is sued for divulging personally identifiable information, sometimes that doesn't happen the way it should be. And there's also a range of other issues, from misinterpretation of the law to botched handling of the evidence. So the legislation is there to some degree, but I would feel that the enforcement is the challenge. If you look at the history of US cyber law, and you look at the fact that the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is the first piece of probably legislation that you could say was standalone, that was in 1986, which is 35 years ago. So from Africa's perspective, I do feel that we have quite a bit of catching up to do in terms of maturity of this legislation. Thank you.
Moses, you know, in Kenya we have the Cybercrime Act and we have the Data Protection Act, but we do not have a lot more in the way of cybersecurity legislation. What is your take on the position in Kenya, and what challenges are we facing, in your opinion, with regard to legislation and policy, as well as institutional capacity?
I think for me, it's we need to be very have all the stakeholders on the table, because I think one of the things I see is, for example, the banking, finance, insurance. I think those guys, have probably done well in terms of borrowing the Data Protection Act and implementing that. But I think for us to be, I think, successful, we need to move ahead and also look at other industries that are also will benefit from the same, and also help us to bring the data protection to where we want it to be. Because you look at things like GDPR in Europe, as much as there are challenges, the enforcement has been very thorough, and you find, as Star says, enforcement is the biggest challenge. But in Europe, they've actually been successful. As much as they're still struggling with their own issues, they just kind of try to do the enforcement. I think that for me, that for Kenya, it will be we need to have all the stakeholders in the different industries come together and see what works for this country, and most importantly, have enforcement mechanisms around the same, and thirdly, have professionals also who understand this particular area be part of those engagements, so they can give them more professional input.
So would you say that this is something that we really need to focus on moving forward?
Definitely. This is something this kind of conversation that needs to be had from different areas, from the private sector to public sector, for us to be successful.
Everyone nodding, so you're all in agreement that we must focus on this to move forward. Muyowa, you as a South African, you have more advanced laws in comparison to Kenya, at least from what I have read. And I know you also have your own challenges. Would you say that, what would be your advice in regard to legislation and constitutional, institutional capacity with regard to handling cybersecurity? Because I think you're more advanced than the rest of us.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about the advancement, because there's a couple of challenges that we have here, and I'm just going to talk to them, and they go across the whole African continent. I think adding to what Moses just mentioned, the biggest challenge we have in Africa, and when we compare ourselves to people who have actually implemented laws and legislated properly, which is the European Union, when we compare it to Africa, and then we also have this concept of consuming a lot of what the West produces. So in terms of technology, we want to go to 4IR, but we're consuming a lot. But at the same time, our laws are not on the same standard as for example, the European Union. And what that actually means is that we cannot really hold accountable, we cannot hold organizations that provide such technology to Africa accountable. So take, for example, the recent spike of questions around Facebook and WhatsApp. When you looked at the European Union, they were covered in terms of their GDPR laws. But when you looked at the rest of Africa, a lot of the countries were actually concerned and thinking about how can we actually get to a position where we can enforce certain laws that correspond to a region, let's say South Africa, or let's say the Africa as a whole. And so what you then saw was organizations, big tech companies, can basically decide what they want to do in terms of the laws with regards to either regions or with regards to the continent as a whole. And this leads to my point that as Africa, we need to work on a shared concept on how we can improve our laws together, because the fight against cyber crimes is not just against the bad guys, but it's also against organizations that provide technology, organizations that harvest data. How can we hold them accountable to the laws and the legislations that we have in the continent? So that becomes something that becomes very critical, in the sense that, yes, in South Africa, we can have some laws, but we too struggled dealing with big tech companies. We too struggle dealing with personal identifiable information of citizens just within the borders of this countries, between the borders of this country with companies that are within this border. So it's not just something that is faced on a continent level. It's something that needs to be worked together across the continent to see how we can improve things. Thank you.
Thank you. I think a united approach towards cybersecurity legislation as Africa would be really useful for all of us. Moses, just final question, and my question is, how do you think we can effectively raise awareness with regard to cybersecurity and resilience challenges faced by manufacturers and other businesses?
I think one of the things is definitely, some of my colleagues here mentioned, is I think culture is very, just creating a culture of cybersecurity is our responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. All of us have to be deliberate to understand it's our responsibility to make sure that as an organization we have we protect our data or our corporate information. I think the other thing is also around reducing the skills shortage, but actually training people, being very deliberate to train people to understand the need of cybersecurity. And this is really for people who are managing some of those solutions. I think that will be going a long way to creating awareness around what exactly you need to also do when you're under attack, or how do you behave. You see a phishing email, how do respond. I think that awareness is important to constantly remind people that some of these things can actually put an organization in a very difficult place if not handled properly.
All right, so dissemination of information as much as we can. All right. Muyowa, your last word as well as your opinion on how best we can raise awareness on cybersecurity and its challenges.
Well, I think Moses, good points. I'll try and just add on to what he said. Look, I think forums such as these ones are very critical because in forums like this, we get to understand the challenges that each country faces. We also get to see the challenges that the continent faces on a broader scale compared to the other continents. And I'm not saying this as a matter of trying to compare continents, but I'm saying this as a matter of learning from each other to look at what other people are implementing. So that becomes very critical, having platforms like this. And I think going forward, it would be important to have more of these platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Muyowa. Taz, finally, and not least of all, but your final word and also your advice on what we can do to raise more awareness on cybersecurity challenges.
Thank you, Nzilani. At the risk of sounding like a stuck record, I have to also concur and say that continual engagement by business forums and governments can really go a long way in educating businesses on mismanaged cybersecurity programs. And furthermore, I think what we're seeing, especially in the ransomware space, the colonial pipeline issue with ransomware was huge, and supply chain security is a real problem. I was absolutely chuffed to hear this whole conference. A lot of talk about IT and OT security, absolutely brilliant, and it's things that we need to look at, not only as individual companies, but governments, I believe, need to understand critical infrastructure and the impacts of actually having any sort of breach on that infrastructure. Then as closing remarks, I think for IR, we need to continue taking a risk-based approach. There's a CISO by the name of Pete Nicoletti who wrote a book, and he once said in that book that you need to eat your vegetables. As much as a lot of fancy things may come along, your AI, your ML, we need to eat our vegetables. We need to make sure that the basics are done. Our risks have been attended to, they've been treated, and we've looked after the business's cybersecurity program.
Thank you, Taz. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and for your expert opinions. This is a conversation that is clearly very long, that we need to have for a very long time as we move forward. And I appreciate all your input. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon. And thank you for your time.